In this series, and exclusive to this channel, I'll be taking you through the evidence in full that Lucy Letby gave to the court during her 10 days on the witness stand. The purpose behind this series is to give you, the viewer, a full and factual understanding of the evidence presented to Lucy Letby during her original trial. What you'll hear next is Lucy Letby's cross-examination in court. This took place at Manchester Crown Court and was conducted by Nicholas Johnson, KC. Lucy Letby, first of all, is there anything that you said before the break that we've just had that you would like to revise or amend? No. I just want to check that I've understood something that we've heard a bit about from various witnesses. It relates to the issue of NGT feeds, okay? Okay. Perhaps rather than me asking you questions, can you just describe exactly how it's done? How we give a tube feed? Yes. We would have to get the milk out of the fridge, measure that into a separate pot to then be warmed. Once the milk is warmed, it would be put into a 10ml syringe, and that 10ml syringe would be attached to the baby's NG tube. Prior to that, we would have aspirated the tube to check for the pH to make sure it's in the correct place. Once we're happy the tube is right, we would then let the feed gravity fall into the baby. Have you ever used the plunger, a syringe plunger, to speed up the flow of milk? No. Is it a job for which you would need to use both hands? Yes. Have you ever sent text to your friends while you've been performing a tube feed? No, absolutely not, no. Where would that fall on the scale of infractions? Well, it's inappropriate, and I don't see how you could do a feed without having both of your hands free with the baby. Yes. So it would follow that if we can identify occasions where you are recorded as giving feeds, but you're also sending text to your friends, then you weren't really giving the feed. No. The feed charts are all estimated time, so I don't agree with that. Oh, right. Tell us about the estimates. So feed charts are sort of done to the nearest quarter of an hour, or half past the hour. So an extra half an hour. Earlier, I think you said you went to quarters. Now you're giving yourself a bit more room. I just said quarters. I said quarter past or half past the hour. What about quarter to the hour? And quarter to the hour. And on the hour? Yes. So quarters is the way you would do it, and is the nearest quarter the time that you get the milk out of the fridge, or is it the time you actually start the feed? Usually it's the time you start the feed. Right. Have you ever used your phone in a clinical area? Not in the nurseries, no. What would take priority, from your point of view? Texting your friends or feeding a child? The baby, obviously. Have you ever texted your friends whilst the resuscitation is going on the unit? No. Are you sure about that? A resuscitation that I've been involved with? Whilst the resuscitation was going on the unit? Not that I can recall, no. Giving anyone a commentary as to what's going on? No. Never? It'd be wholly inappropriate, that sort of thing, would it? I can't recall texting during a resuscitation, no. Can we have an answer to the question? Would it be wholly inappropriate? Yes, if I was at the cot side, yes. But not if you're somewhere else in the unit? No, it's accepted that we use our phones in other places on the unit, yes. But that's not the question, is it? The question is it appropriate to be texting your friends whilst the resuscitation is going on? If I'm not playing a part in that, then yes. That's fine, yes, giving a commentary to your friends. Well, it's not a commentary. Right. Do you know what I'm talking about? No. Well, we'll come to it. Staffing levels. You're not suggesting, are you, that the staffing levels in the unit remain the same irrespective of the number of children that are in the unit? Yes, the staffing levels are set standard levels. Set standard levels. But they would vary depending on how many babies were in the unit. At times, yes. And what the needs of the children were? Yes. We'll deal with specifics in due course. But yesterday, for example, you were being asked about the number of children in a particular case that were in nursery 1, and you suggested they were all intensive care babies. That's not necessarily true, is it? I don't know who you're talking about. Well, We will come to specifics, but I'm asking you general questions at the moment. Don't worry, you'll be able to deal with the specifics, but what I'm asking you to do is to deal with generalities first of all. Now, we heard from several witnesses during the course of the evidence that just because a baby is in nursery 1, it doesn't follow that they are an intensive care baby. No, that's right. So that's correct. It also follows, doesn't it, that just because a baby is in nursery 2, they are not a high dependency baby necessarily. No, that's right. So it's dangerous to look at the location of a child and conclude necessarily that their needs are at a particular level. Do you agree? Yes, you'd have to look at the context of the baby, yes. Exactly. Do you agree that if certain combinations of these children were attacked, then unless there was more than one person attacking them, you have to be the attacker? No. You don't agree? No, I've not attacked any children. I understand your case. You are saying you haven't done anything, right? But if the jury concluded a certain combination of children were actually attacked by someone, then the shift pattern gives the answer as to who the attacker was, doesn't it? No, I don't agree. You don't agree? Why don't you agree? Because just because I was on shift doesn't mean that I've done anything. No, but it would follow that if let's say, I'll use numbers, all right? I won't refer to specific cases. Let's say if baby 5, 8, 10 and 12 were all attacked, if the jury look at the medical evidence and say they were all attacked by someone and you're the only common feature, it would have to be, wouldn't it, that you're the attacker? That's for them to decide. Well, of course it is. Of course it is. But as a principle, do you agree with that? No, I don't feel I can answer that. Okay. I'm going to ask you about some of the doctors individually, all right? Yes. I'll deal with them in alphabetical order. Lucy Beebe, who was at the time a senior house officer who reviewed child I. Did you get on well with her? No, I don't recall Lucy. You just don't remember her at all? I remember when she came to give evidence, I recognised her, but other than that, no. She doesn't bear you a grudge, as far as you know? No. You never fell out with her, as far as you remember? No. Dr. Gail Beach, who dealt with child E and F? Yes. Do you remember her? Yes. Did you ever have any problems with Dr. Beach? No. So far as you know, does she bear you any ill will? No. Dr. Stephen Breary, did you ever have any problems with him? No. I think a while ago you said he was one of the bastards. At the time that we're talking about when I was at work on the unit, I did not have a problem with Steve then. No, it came after. Okay. You were asked, I think, by Mr. Myers why you categorised him in that way. Do you remember? Yes. And you said you were putting him in the same category as Dr. Ravi Jairam. And when asked a question, you said, because of the things that they've been saying about you. That was the reason you categorised them in that unflattering way. Yes. What had they been saying about you? They'd been making comments that I was responsible for the deaths of babies. Right. Anything else? Yes, they were very insistent I'd be removed from the unit. So far as while you were working on the unit until you were removed from the unit at the end of June, you hadn't had a problem with him. Is that fair or not? Well, let's stick with one by one. Dr. Breary. We just had a normal working relationship, yes. Dr. Andrew Brunton, the Scotsman who dealt with child D? Yes. Any problems with him? No. Dr. Rachel Chang, who dealt with child O and P? No, no problem. What about Dr. A? Any problem with him? No. Were you in love with him? No. Did you ever write down that you were in love with him? No, I loved Dr. A as a friend. I was not in love with him. Can we look at image 10, please? I'm not going to deal with much of your writings at this stage, okay? I'll deal with them at the end. But I just want to ask you about this one. This, the jury will remember, is the note addressed to the triplets. Is that right? It refers to the triplets, yes. Yes. Well, you took us through the note to them and you filled in the gaps with names and other words. Is that right? Yes. You see on the left-hand side of the screen there's a very heavy circle. Yes. You see just above that it says, I'm sorry. Yes. And you see, just above the word sorry, there is a word. Have you got that? Can I move the cursor? Yes, please do, please do. That word, yes. Mr. Myers suggested to you that said Timmy. Do you remember? Yes. And you said that was reference to a dog you had as a child. Not that I had as a child. A dog that I used to walk at that time, yes, called Tim. What it actually says is tiny boy, doesn't it? I can't confirm either way. It does look like boy, yes. Tiny boy. Who was Tiny Boy? My dog has a child called Whiskey. We used to refer to him as Tiny Boy. So it doesn't say Timmy. I can't say specifically. It could have been a reference to Timmy, or it could be Tiny Boy. Either way, it's about the dog. Well, we'll remember what you've just said, and we'll come to more references in due course on other documents. We'll see. Moving on, if we can remove the image, please. Thank you. Dr. Peter Fielding, who was involved with child G. Any issues with Dr. Fielding? No. Dr. John Gibbs? Any issues with Dr. Gibbs? No. Dr. David Harkness? Any issues with him? No. Dr. B? Any issues with Dr. B? We didn't have the best working relationship, but we worked amicably together. Well, you didn't approve of her smoking. Is that fair? Yes. She probably wouldn't have approved of you taking handover sheets home if she'd known about it, would she? That's something for her to answer. Dr. J-Ram, is there any additional information you want to give us about him, other than what you've already told us? No, at the time of these events, we had a normal working relationship. You were very interested in him, weren't you, on the internet? Sorry? You were very interested in him on the internet. He was one of the people you'd search for. Search for a lot of people, yes. You did. Dr. Rachel Lambie, who dealt with child B. Yes. Any issues with her? No. Dr. Elizabeth Newby, one of the consultants? No. No problem? No. Dr. Sally Ogden? No. Dr. Sarah Rylance? She was the lady who gave evidence from Switzerland, you may remember in the case of child D. No, there's no issue. Dr. Saladi? No. Dr. C? No. Dr. Alison Ventress? No. Finally, Dr. Christopher Wood. He was the SHO who you claim to have spoken to in the case of child E. Yes. Any problems with him? No. Are you suggesting that there is some sort of agreement between any of the medical staff who have given evidence in this case? Some sort of agreement to get you? In a consultant group, yes, I do believe that. Who's in the conspiracy group then? Which individuals? Yes. I believe Ravi Jairam, Stephen Breary, Dr. B and John Gibbs. So the gang of four, yes? Yes. I'll refer to them that way rather than repeating their names. Yes. And what is the conspiracy between the gang of four? That they have apportioned blame onto me. And the motive for apportioning blame onto you is what, please? I believe to cover failings at the hospital. Right, well, just so that you can be thinking about it, in each case I will ask you questions so that you can explain to the jury what the failings were, all right? Okay. By and large, you haven't been asked those questions yet, but I will ask them. I'm not going to ask you now as a general point because it's not sufficiently precise. What I will do, though, is ask you in each case what the failings are. So would you think about that so that you can answer the questions in due course? Yes, I will. Thank you. Do you agree that child F was poisoned with insulin? Yes, I agree that he had insulin, yes. Do you agree that somebody gave it to him unlawfully? Yes. Do you agree that somebody targeted him specifically? No. So you think it was a random act? Well, I don't know where the insulin came from. Do you agree that child L was poisoned with insulin? From the blood results, yes. Do you agree that somebody targeted him specifically? No. I don't know that the intent was to cause harm. I don't know how the insulin got there, or by who. What are the possibilities, realistically? Knowing what you know as a senior nurse, what are the possibilities as to how that insulin got into his dextrose? I'm talking about child L now, the bag. Well, it's happened at some point on the unit, or the bag already had the insulin in when it came up from the pharmacy. Well, we will deal specifically with the evidence relating to child L, and I will invite you in due course to reconsider that answer, all right? But your answer for the time being is it either was in the bag when it came up from the pharmacy, or someone's added it on the unit. You've asked me ways that it could happen, yes. I'll be a bit more specific then. Knowing what you know about the insulin readings, or the blood sugar readings to be more precise, what are the realistic possibilities in child L's case as you see it? Well, I don't believe that any member of staff on the unit would make a mistake in giving insulin. No, mistake is not an option in this case for the insulin babies, is it? No. That's for child F as well. You accept that? Yes. So it's deliberate poisoning by someone, but not you. Insulin's been added by somebody. I can't comment on how or who. Right. Just that it was not me. What about when? When what? Well, again, I'll come back to this, all right? Let's just take child L. When was the insulin first put in child L's dextrose bag? Well, I don't know because I didn't put the insulin in, so I've no idea. But what do the blood sugar results tell us as to when it was put in? I can't recall now without looking at the charts. All right, well, I'll come back to that. Park that for now. Have you not given that any thought as to when it's happened? Yes, but I haven't got the details in front of me right now. Okay, well, I'll always give you the opportunity to look at documents, don't worry. Don't feel under any pressure from me to answer questions without looking at the documents if you feel you need to look at them, all right? Okay. But what are the dangers of unprescribed insulin? Insulin should not be given to a patient that doesn't need it. Yes, but what's likely to happen if it is given to a patient who doesn't need it? It will cause them to become unwell. They'll become hypoglycemic, and with that comes a number of problems such as seizures, apneas, even death. I'm going to move on to your QIS training, all right? Yes. This is the last subject I'm going to deal with before I turn to child A. I will deal with the babies in the same order that Mr. Myers did to help you. So that's the menu. You started your training towards the end of 2014. Is that right? I can't remember now, but if that's agreed, then yes. Well, it's what you said on the 2nd of May. Okay. So you seem to remember it on the 2nd of May. Okay. If anyone wants to check what you said, if they look at page 32 of that transcript, they will find that that is what you said. I think you told the jury that that involved a university module, a placement at the Women's Hospital in Liverpool, and it took about 6 months. Yes. And that you couldn't be specific as to the date that you qualified, but as you remembered it, it was March, April of 2015. Is that right? Yes. When you were asked to summarise what the consequence of the qualification was, you said it meant that you were qualified to look after intensive care babies. Yes. And in practical terms, so far as your day-to-day employment at Chester was concerned, did that have the effect of putting you into nursery 1 much more often than you would have been without the qualification? Yes. Subject, of course, to the point that we've already made about the fact that a child in nursery 1 isn't always intensive care. No. Part of your training involved education about lines. Yes. And we saw in the paperwork, which was adduced right at the end of the prosecution case, one of the issues with line access is the possibility of air embolus. Yes. And so at the time that you dealt with child A and child B, at the beginning of June 2015, how long had you been qualified to access the lines of neonates? So after the ITU course, you can access central lines. So prior to that, it would have been peripheral lines only. You had, of course, heard of air embolus, hadn't you, when you were spoken to by the police? Yes. And what did you understand from your education and wider knowledge were the dangers of injecting air into a line? I think all nursing staff know that any air getting into a patient could ultimately lead to death. Yes. Even in the films, when a doctor is about to give an injection to a patient, you see them tap the syringe and squirt a bit of liquid out at the end, don't you? Yes. So everybody knows the dangers of air embolus, don't they? Pretty much. Yes, it's part of your nurse training, yes. But even people with no medical training like me, everybody knows, don't they? I can't speak for everyone. All right. Let's start with the case of child A, please. You were first interviewed on the 4th of July 2018. Independently of the medical notes, did you have any memory of child A? Yes. Just for anyone's note, it is of course count 1. He was born on the 7th of June and died a day later on the 8th. He was, as we all know, the twin of child B. Before child A, had you ever known a child to die unexpectedly within about 24 hours of birth? I can't comment on that. I'm not sure. Well, how many infant deaths had you witnessed in your employment before child A? Not many, maybe 2 or 3 at the Countess, and then several more of my placements at Liverpool Women's. 2 more at Liverpool Women's. You say several more. I'm offering an alternative of 2 more. I can't say. I don't keep track of numbers. I'm just going off what you said to the police, you see. Well, my memory would have been clearer then than it is now. Okay. Well, we can go to the interviews if you'd like to check it. Page 16 of your child A interview. I'm suggesting that you told the police that you'd seen 2 at Liverpool. Okay. When child A and child B were born, were the staff, including the nursing staff, talking about their mother's antiphospholipid syndrome? Not at the time. When I was looking after child A? At any time? You tell us. Well, the first time I met child A and was on shift was the day of the event. Afterwards, the condition was talked about, yes. Was it being offered up as an explanation for what had happened, as far as you were aware? It was possibly a contributing factor. That was what was being discussed at the time. But we know now that it wasn't, don't we? Yes. Is it your case that the staffing levels in the Countess of Chester Hospital contributed to child A's death? In part, yes. Right. How? Through the amount of time that he was without fluids for, and the issues around the lines insertion. Right. So he was without fluids from sometime about 4 p.m. or thereabouts, 3 or 4 p.m. Yes. So your case is what? That he died from dehydration? No, I'm saying that they're contributing factors. But according to you, at least, how did that lack of fluids for about 4 hours contribute to his death? What's your case? They would have put him at an increased risk of collapse, and he would have had less reserves to then fight off any infection or any procedures that we were doing. So it's your case that 4 hours without fluids killed child A? No, that's not what I'm saying. No. What? I can't tell you how child A died. I don't know. Okay. Is it your case that the competence of the medical staff contributed to child A's death? Again, I can't say definitively how child A died, but yes, I think the issues around the lines made him more vulnerable, yes. And what issues around his lines made him more vulnerable? That he was left with a line in situ, a UVC that was not for use and was due to be removed and it wasn't. And then having a long line sighted and time passing by without that line being connected to anything and being confirmed on X-ray. It's not usual practice. All right. Did you fill in a datix? No. Why not? Just haven't. You fill in a lot of datix forms, don't you? Yes. 3 at the end of June 2016. Right. We'll come to them, but 2 of which contained lies, according to Dr. Breary. Yes? According to Dr. Breary. If you seriously thought that child A's death was contributed to by him not having fluids for any significant period of time, why didn't you fill in a datix form? It was discussed amongst staff. We all talked about that as contributing factors at the time. That was readily discussed amongst staff, including the consultant. No. The question is, why did you... I didn't feel I needed to do a datix. It had been raised verbally by senior staff, 2 senior staff. And those senior staff were who? Ravi Jairam and other members of the nursing team. No, Ravi Jairam and... I didn't say 2 senior staff. I escalated the concerns to senior staff, and one being Ravi Jairam, the other senior nursing staff. And part of that discussion is why we then kept the fluids and the line from child A. I'll come to that in a moment, if I may. Was child A's death anything to do with Mel Taylor? I don't know why child A died. But I'm asking you whether it's your case. Does it have anything to do with Mel Taylor? If we agree that the cause of death was an air embolus, then I believe she attached fluids to those lines, yes. So that's Mel Taylor's fault? Yes, if that's what we agree, that child A died from that, then yes. Because you weren't standing over him at the time he collapsed? No, I did not have any access to his lines, so therefore if an embolism came, it must have come from the person connecting the fluids, which is not me. Would you admit it if you did? Did what? Put air into him? I haven't put air in, so I'm not going to. The question is, would you admit it if you did? It's not something I would ever do. I'm going to ask you about some of the descriptions that have been given by your colleagues in evidence about child A to see whether you agree or disagree with them, all right? Okay. Starting with Dr. Beach's evidence, on the 7th of June, Dr. Beach told the jury that child A was doing well, that he was crying and vigorous on stimulation shortly after his birth at about 9 p.m. Do you disagree with that? No, I wasn't present for that, so... The following day, the day he died, which was Monday the 8th of June, at 9:45, Dr. Ogden at tile 84 described child A as handling well. Do you disagree with that? Again, I wasn't there, so I can't comment. That's her opinion. Well, are you aware of anything to contradict Dr. Ogden's opinion? No. And as you've already told us, in the afternoon there were problems identified with the UVC, and then the cannula to which he was attached became blocked. Yes. Do you remember that at 1900 hours on the 8th of June, Dr. Harkness put a central line into child A? I know that happened, yes. Do you accept that you were standing over child A at the time he collapsed? I accept I was within his cot space checking equipment, yes. How close were you to him at the time he collapsed? I was in the close vicinity. I was checking the equipment around his incubator. Yes. Give us an idea in terms of this court. Could you reach out and touch him? I could touch the incubator, not... I'd have to open the doors to actually get into the baby, but yes, I could touch the outside of the incubator. Could you touch the lines? No. Why not? The incubator was closed. Do you accept that at the time child A collapsed, Mel Taylor was on the computer doing her nursing notes? Yes. It's your case, and correct me if I've misunderstood, that Mel Taylor was the sterile nurse in terms of attaching child A's line? Yes. Do you accept that it was at 20:05 hours that the bag was hung? Yes. Do you accept that you co-signed for that? Yes. And do you accept that the order of the signatures doesn't illuminate the question of who it was that actually hung the bag? That's correct. There's no way of knowing from signatures. It was 15 minutes later, wasn't it, that child A collapsed at 20:20? Yes. And what I'm going to do is to remind you of various people's descriptions of what they saw, okay? What I'm going to ask you is whether you agree or disagree with their descriptions. Okay. Do you understand? Yes. So if you want me to repeat any of this, you say so, all right? Okay. I'm quoting from the transcript, and I'm going to start with Dr. Harkness. For your lordship's note, this is day 12, pages 90 to 92. What Dr. Harkness said was this: there was a very unusual patchiness of the skin, which I had never seen before, and I have only seen in cases since within the Countess of Chester Hospital, and nothing other than that. I'm not asking you to comment on what he has or hasn't seen, but do you agree with his description that there was a very unusual patchiness of his skin? No. There were patches of a kind of blue-purple colour. There were patches of bright red colour. There were white patches, and they didn't fit with something that you would find on a baby that's not pumping any blood around their body. Do you agree with that? No. This had bright red patches, which does not fit because red patches means you've got blood going round your body. Do you agree with that? No. It had purple patches. It had white patches. I agree with that. Yes, he had mottling. No red marks? No. No red blotchiness? Sitting here now, I can't recall any blotchiness, no. Are you saying Dr. Harkness has made that up? I didn't see it. If he saw something that I didn't, that's something he has to justify. That's not quite the question, you see. I'm asking whether you dispute something. If you can't comment, then that's one thing. But you say, no. I said, is that right? No. It's not something I saw. I'll come to what you saw. The question is, are you disputing what Dr. Harkness says he saw? Yes. Why? Because I was present and I didn't see those. Right. So because you didn't see it, you are disputing it. Yes. Dr. J-Ram, this was his description, and this was on day 14, page 126. He was very pale. What I really didn't give any clinical significance to at the time was sort of unusual patchiness of discoloration. Do you agree with that? I don't agree with the discoloration. I agree he was pale. It's interesting because it's the first time I've seen that. Child A was very pale to blue. Do you agree with the pale to blue? He was pale. I don't recall him being completely blue, no. But they were unusual. The best way to describe them is pink patches that appeared mainly on the torso, which seemed to sort of appear and disappear and flit around. Do you agree with that? No, I don't. Nurse A, your friend. She was your friend, wasn't she? Yes. A good friend? Yes. Do you trust Nurse A? As a colleague or as a friend? Both? Yes. What she said, how many years' experience did Nurse A have? Well, I don't know exact figures, but she was very experienced. Approximately 20 years? Possibly, yes. Is she the sort of person you would defer to? Whose advice you would take? Yes. If you had a problem, is she the sort of person that could be relied on to give you a good solution? Yes. What she said is this. I'd never seen a baby look that way before. I mean, he looked very ill. Did he look very ill? Yes. He had a discoloration pattern that I've never seen before. Was this a discoloration pattern that you had ever seen before? I didn't see a discoloration pattern. So you don't agree with that? No. He was very white with sort of purpley blotches. Do you agree with that? I agree that he was white with purple markings that looked like mottling, yes. He did look cyanotic as well, but it was this purpley blotchiness with white that I'd not seen before. Do you agree with that? No. She's not describing there, is she? The common or garden blotchiness that babies have on neonatal units? No. Because she's never seen it before, with all that experience. Do you agree with that? That's what she said, yes. My recollection, it was all over him, everywhere, maybe more torso, and I can't remember clearly, but unusual. It had come on very suddenly. Do you agree with that? I agree that the colour change came on very suddenly, yes. Let's go to what you said, bearing in mind that you don't accept the red marks. Can we go to your interview, please? It's in the first interview bundle. It's the very first of the interviews, so it's child A number 1. If you just turn back a page from where you are, if you wouldn't mind, we'll just do the formalities. We can see here that the date of this interview was the 4th of July 2018, CB1. Have you got that? Yes. The time that the interview commenced was 10:23. It concluded at 12:04. Let's go to page 8 and get your description, please. You are being asked to describe what you saw. Is that right? Yes, I'm asked to interpret what pale is. Yes. Yes. So the second question on the page, you're asked the following question. Tell me how you interpret pale, first of all, in a neonatal baby. You replied, so it's a loss of colour. Babies are usually quite pink and he'd become more pale, as in almost white. And you make it clear that that means there's something wrong. It could be infection, could be hypoglycemia, when they've had a sudden collapse. Then you were asked the following question, and mottled the same thing. How do you interpret the mottled appearance? To which you replied, Mottled is a bit more of almost like a rash appearance, like blotchy red marks on the skin. Is that what you were referring to as mottled? Yes. Then further down the page you say the following. So when the baby's quite pale and white, they can have sort of red areas on them. Red. Is that right? Yes, this is all in relation to mottling, yes. And you reply over the page, yeah, like reddy purple. Yes. You say he was centrally pale. Yes. Then if we go to page 11, please, halfway down the page you're being asked about the time child A collapsed. It's pretty much exactly halfway. You say the following. I believe I was checking the equipment, yes, at his cot side and his charts. Is that right? Yes. Then the police officer asked you this. When you talk about this mottled rash, can you give us any further description of how it showed? Shape? So what you're being asked here is, what did you see, aren't you? Yes. You're not being asked about your description of mottling. You're being asked a specific question, what did you see? Do you agree? In relation to the mottling, yes. No, in relation to what you saw on child A. Well, when you talk about this mottled rash, yes, that's what I'm referring to. I'm paraphrasing it, but what the police are saying to you here is, you said he had a mottled rash. Yes. What did you see? Yes. What are you saying is a mottled rash? Yes? Yes. Do you agree? Fair? Yes. So that's the question you were asked. Can you give us any further description of it, how it showed, shape? You replied, I think from memory it was more on the side that had his line in. Is that right? Yes, I remember the paleness and discoloration was more to the left-hand side, yes. You were then asked the following question. Which side was that? Do you remember? And you said, as you just have, I think it was his left. You were then asked, and you described it as a red-purple colour. Can you sort of help us with any comparisons with anything colour-wise, the way it showed? Was it bright red? Was it dark red? And you replied, I think he was more pale than the mottling, than the little areas of the mottling. Yes. Were you not describing blotchy red marks on his skin? I was referring to mottling. That's how I would describe mottling, and I also felt he was more pale than mottled. So is it your evidence, just so that we understand where the lines between the prosecution and you are, is it your evidence that there was nothing unusual to be seen on child A? No, it's unusual to have a baby that is pale when he was particularly white on one side. That is unusual. So far as the discoloration was concerned, is it your case that there was nothing unusual about the discoloration? I don't recall there being an abnormal discoloration, no. So that's your case? Yes. So far as the testing of the bag was concerned, which you mentioned earlier, I think Nurse A accepted that you had asked for the bag to be tested, as you said in interview. Yes. Was it tested? I don't know. I put it aside and labelled it. The responsibility then went to the shift leader of the next shift. Did you ever follow it up? I can't say. I can't recall specifically, no. I know I labelled the bag and I put the request in the diary and I handed it over to the shift leader. Right. Further evidence that was given by those who tried to save child A, Dr. Harkness. Do you remember him telling the jury how he bagged child A? I can't recall that now, but yes, if that's what he said. And he said that child A's chest was rising and falling, that his heart rate and his saturations were declining. Do you remember that? Yes, well, not specifically. I'm relying that that's what he said. I can't recall everybody's evidence in detail. Sure. I'm sure I'll be corrected if I'm misrepresenting what people have said. Do you accept, given that pattern of air going in and out, the sats and the heart rate falling, that this wasn't a normal respiratory problem that child A had? I don't think I can comment on what condition child A had at that point. I'm not asking you for a diagnosis. What I'm asking you to give us is your point of view about this issue of air going in and out, and the heart rate falling and the saturations falling. So the evidence is that air is going in, carbon dioxide is going out with more air, but more carbon dioxide. And yet child A's heart rate and saturation rate were falling. And that is not a normal respiratory problem, is it? No, generally if you've got an airway and you've got chest movement, you would expect to see a rise in observations, yes. Exactly. Dr. Jairam dealt with a number of other issues, which I'm asking for your comment on because you were there. He said that the heart rate on the Philips monitor was normal. Do you agree? I can't recall specific values now. But if there had been something abnormal, would you have taken any notice of it? His monitor did alarm. That was how we were alerted to him having a desaturation, so he must have had a change in observations. Yes. The trace. Do you remember the P waves and the something else waves that he gave us a little tutorial about? Do you remember that bit of evidence? Yes. He said the trace of the heart was normal. I can't comment on that. That's not something that nursing staff could interpret. Have you ever seen an arrhythmia in a neonate? No, I don't think so. No. Dr. J-Ram said that child A's heart was pumping normally. Do you disagree with that? That's his opinion. I don't feel I can assess that. You don't contradict it? No. Dr. Marnarides found an air bubble in child A's brain and in his lung. Did you inject child A with air? No. Dr. Arthurs found air bubbles in his great vessels. Do you remember that? Yes. Just like child D and child O. Yes. That's because you injected him with air, isn't it? No. After this, did you want to get straight back into nursery 1? Yes. Why? From my experience at Liverpool Women's, you're actively encouraged that if you've lost a baby in a certain cot space, that you go straight back into that nursery and care for other babies so that you sort of move on from that first experience, and it doesn't almost prevent you from going back into the intensive care environment. Did you tell the truth to the police? In what respect? Yes, I have told the truth. Can we just go over your second interview, please? Right at the end, it's CB 27. You're asked about the dangers of air going into the circulation. Yes. And you're asked about what the dangers are. And you said, I don't know what it would cause. Is that true? Yes, I don't know the pathological reasons that it would. I know ultimately it would end in death, yes. Anything between that, I don't know. And the question was what? What are the dangers? You have just told us death. Why didn't you give that answer? I can't answer that. Were you playing daft? No, it's something that every nurse would know. Oh yes, absolutely. So why didn't you say so? I've also said that I don't know exactly how it would affect a baby, and that's true. I know the ultimate in anything that you do, the ultimate serious outcome, could be death. What that would look at, what that would appear as in the symptoms of the baby, I don't know. I'm going to move on to child B next. Is there anything that you said this morning that you would like to revise or amend? No. There's one thing that I overlooked, which I'd like to deal with. Would you go to the defence statement that I gave you yesterday, please? Could you go to page 6, paragraph 39? Would you read that out to the jury, please? There was some blotchiness on child A's body, but no one discussed it with me, and I don't remember it being mentioned amongst the nurses. Why didn't you put mottling? I think they're interchangeable. We move on to child B, please. Before you were interviewed for the first time on the 4th of July 2018, did you have any memory, independent memory, of child B? Very little. Is it your case that staffing levels contributed to child B's collapse? No, I don't know what caused her collapse. Is it your case that medical competence contributed? Again, I don't know why she collapsed. Have you identified any mistakes that were made with her treatment? No. Do you remember the devastation that child A's death caused his family? Yes. Do you remember child A and B's dad literally being prostrate on the floor following child A's death? What does that mean? Sorry? On the floor, lying on the floor. I don't recall anyone lying on the floor, no. Well, can we go to child B's sequence of events, please, to tile 132. This is your message. Would you read it out, please? I said, oh, don't feel like that. I'm sorry you had to end your shift like that. I said to Nurse A that I can't look after child B because I just don't know how I'm going to feel seeing parents. Dad was on the floor crying, saying, please don't take our baby away, when I took him to the mortuary. It's just heartbreaking. Glad the photos are nice. You don't remember that? No. Were you keen to give your colleagues the impression that you didn't want to take responsibility for child B? It wasn't that I didn't take responsibility. It was just that I felt she'd be better looked after by somebody else. But didn't you feel that getting back into nursery 1 was the best thing to do? To get back on the horse like they do in Liverpool? Yes, but not with a baby in a family that we've dealt with before, that have just lost their child. But you did migrate back to nursery 1, didn't you? Despite that. We cover all of the nurseries. Yes. Would you answer the question, please? You did migrate back to nursery 1. At which point? Did you? Or didn't you? I will have been in nursery 1 at some point, yes. We'll get to the point. Do you accept that child B did well on the day shift of June 9th, the day after her brother had died? I have no memory. I was not allocated for child B, so I don't recall the handover. Right. Well, can we look at the interviews, please? The 12th page of the child B interviews. What is your second answer on that page, please? There hadn't been any undue concerns expressed. Yes, and that's about the clinical position of child B, isn't it? Yes. So do you accept that child B did well on the day shift of June 9th? Yes. We received evidence that she was off CPAP that day, having skin to skin. Do you remember that? Yes. If anybody wants to make a note, that's tiles 76 and 78. That she was rooting for milk, we were told by Joanne Williams. Do you remember that? No, but I accept that. Let's look. Tile 84. I'm not suggesting it's a memory test. This is Joanne Williams' note. Just scroll down, please. Can you see on about the 6th line or so? Yes, rooting, looking for feeds. Yes, that is a positive picture, isn't it? Yes. So the signs were good. Do you accept that? Yes. On looking at the notes, yes. Do you recall the evidence from child B's family that in effect they stood guard over her following the death of child A? I know that they were very much present on the unit, yes, and allowances were made for that, yes. But they left, according to the agreed evidence, shortly after 8 p.m. Do you remember that? I don't remember, but I accept it if it's agreed, yes. Yes, it was evidence that was read to the jury by agreement. Okay. I'd like to go to the staff presence at tile 145, please, with Mr. Murphy's assistance. There we see the population distribution and the corresponding responsible nursing staff, don't we? Yes. We can see that in nursery 4, Lisa Walker was working. Yes. And she was working the day before, wasn't she? I don't recall that myself. Okay. It's a matter of record. Okay. Your friend, Nurse A, was working? Yes. So she is the second commonality in terms of the staff. Your friend, Mary Griffith, was working as well, wasn't she? Yes. And she was your friend, wasn't she? Yes. Catherine Percival Ward was the shift leader? Yes. She had a single child in nursery 4? Yes. Did you get on with her? Yes. Does she bear you a grudge? No, I got on well with all of the nursing colleagues. She hadn't been working the previous night, though, had she? No. Do you remember the evidence that she gave to the jury on March 21st this year in the case of child P, when she told the jury that you had said to her that working in nurseries 3 and 4 was boring? Yes, I remember that. And that you would, to use her word, migrate back to nursery 1 when things happened? Yes. And that is true, isn't it? You did migrate back to nursery 1. Yes, in response to things that were happening, which any other member of staff would be expected to do as well. Well, we will see. You had 2 children in nursery 3, is that right? Yes. And you didn't like being there, did you? That's not accurate at all, no. You were bored? No, I've never been bored at work. I've never described my work as boring. Well, let's just deal with what happened prior to child B's collapse just after midnight. Again, if Mr. Murphy can help, and if you wouldn't mind yourself, Miss Letby, looking at the neonatal review. It's the first bundle of neonatal reviews, which is in the white file. Your babies, as we have just established, were H, M and EB. So let's just deal with what you were doing at the beginning of the shift, if we may, from the neonatal review. We see in lines 1, 3, 6, 9 and 10 that you were dealing with HM and EB? Yes. They're both your children, in effect. Yes. You're the designated nurse. That continues down towards the bottom of the page at 2200 hours at lines 25, 26, 27 and 30. Are we agreed so far? Yes. Over the page, on page 2, we have 4 lines, 38 to 42, where you're dealing with HM at or about 2300 hours. Yes. Then there's the nasal prongs incident, if I can call it that, at line 47 at midnight. Yes. Then over the page, line 70, we have the event for child B when the prosecution say she collapsed. Yes. I suggested to you a moment ago that you were bored, and you did not accept that. So if we go now, please, to the sequence starting with tile 151, that's you texting Yvonne Griffiths, isn't it? Yes. And this shows, doesn't it, as a matter of fact, that as I suggested to you earlier, the parents of child A and B were still on the unit at this time. Yes. At tile 165, please. It shows that between 2041 and 2100 hours, you were texting your friend, Mina Lapalainen. Yes. And as we've just seen, that's just after you had been dealing with EB and HM in nursery 3. Okay. And this is why I'm suggesting you're bored, because you're engaging in chit-chat with your friend. No, that's common practice. We all used to do that on the unit. That's not unique to me. Tile 169. More messages to and from Mina in a 10-minute period between 2100 and 2110. Yes. Then Jennifer Jones Key in the next tile. Manic, hope you're okay. And you respond immediately, manic. And then you at 172. Mel took it hard, we spoke earlier. Thank you, we're a good team. Say hi back. And those messages continued with both Nurse F, Jennifer Jones Key, and indeed Yvonne Griffiths, through the tiles up to and including tile 181 at 2132. You are bored? No, all the members of the staff used a phone on that unit, and this is me replying to our ward manager who has texted me whilst I'm on shift. It was accepted that we used our phones on the unit. We can take it then that staffing levels weren't an issue on this shift. Is that right? I can't comment for the whole of the shift. Obviously at this point my babies have been cared for. What do you mean? You can't comment for the whole of the shift? I'm not responsible for the other babies, so I can't say what care needs they are having and receiving at this time. Well, are you suggesting that there was some deficiency in staffing levels? Not at this moment. I can't see what was going on with the other babies. Let's continue with your messages, please. If we could go to 186 next. You asking Jennifer Jones Key whether Yvonne Griffiths was in. Is that right? Yes. 187, she replies. 188, her clarification. 189, your reply. 190, her reply. 194, another message from you. 195, 196, 197. A block of social messages for 27 minutes between 22:01 and 22:28. Yes. Can we go back to the neonatal review chart, please? Page 2. In the middle of that block of messages, line 30, you signing for a prescription for HM. Yes. You didn't use your phone in clinical areas? No, I didn't use my phone in the nurseries. No, that's right. Tile 202, a further block of social messaging between you and someone called Gail R. Who is Gail R? I lived with Gail R in the staff accommodation at Ash House. So is she another nurse or employee of the hospital? Yes. Were you bored? No. As a matter of fact, do you spend a lot of time texting when you're in either nursery 3 or nursery 4? I text regardless of where I am on shift. So even if you've got an ITU baby? At times when they're not needing care, yes. And I think everybody would say the same thing if they were honest. If we go back to the neonatal review and just pick up where I left off, please, at page 3 of 7, we see that at 2302 and 2303, that block of 5 entries, in respect of which there's probably a degree of similarity, in the sense that the prescription and the update is the same event, isn't it? Yes. So there's double counting, if you like. We see that's what you were doing with your friend Nurse A at that time. Is that right? Yes, I was on the computer at this time, yes. We know from the evidence, and it's tile 47, that child B desaturated at about midnight. Is that right? Yes. And if Mr. Murphy wouldn't mind, by going back to the sequence of events to tile 209, we have that event represented by that tile. Is that right? Yes. Immediately afterwards, in a succeeding tile, 210, we see Nurse A's note relating to it. Yes. That's when you migrated back into Nursery 1, wasn't it? I was working in Nursery 1 at points, yes, with medications. After this time, you're in Nursery 1, I'm going to suggest. Yes. If we go back to the neonatal review, page 3 of 7, lines 62 and 63, we see you involved first of all with child B immediately after her desaturation. Yes. Line 62, what was going on at that point? So from this here, Babevan and lipid was being given. Yes, this was a new bag, wasn't it? I can't say from looking at this on its own. Okay, it may have been a continuing 48-hour bag. I can't say from this. Let's go back to the sequence of events then, please, Mr. Murphy. Tile 213. This is a prescription for lipid, is that right? No, this is a TPN and lipid together. Yes, right, thank you. Whose signature appears on it? Myself. Who else's? No one's. Shouldn't there be another one on there? Yes, this isn't the form that we both sign. There's an additional form. But that's not the question. Shouldn't someone else's signature be on this document? Potentially on this document, but as long as it's on the other sheet, that would be acceptable. Potentially. Should another person's signature be on this document? Yes, ideally, yes. Thank you. Here's the other document. What do we see here on day 3, 9th of the 6th, 2015? It's got myself and Nurse A starting a new bag of TPN and lipid at 0005. So you have migrated back to Nursery 1. All medications have to be checked by 2 nurses, so inevitably it would have to be another member of staff that was assisting Nurse A. All right, let's go to the next tile then, please. Let's concentrate on what's going on at midnight. 2410 is the way it appears there. Is that right? Potentially. That's not my writing, but it looks either 00 or 10, yes. Okay, then if we scroll down, whose writing is that number there? I can't say. Whose writing appears in the next column? Myself. Well, it looks similar, yes. 45 is you, isn't it? The what, sorry? The 45 in the 2410 column. Oh, potentially, yes. Potentially, yes. Does that mean yes? I can't be definitive because it's not my writing at the top. You had migrated back into Nursery 1, hadn't you? Well, that's an expected course. Whoever's working in Nursery 1 is going to need assistance from another nurse. What? To do the observations? I'm not saying that I've done the observations, but potentially, yes, if Nurse A was busy doing something else, then we would support each other, yes. Let's look at the blood gas a few minutes later at tile 215, 0016. Whose writing is that? That's mine. You had migrated back into Nursery 1, hadn't you? Well, blood gas needs 2 nurses, so yes, 2 nurses would need to be there. And yes, I was there. Well, you say that. But as a matter of fact, as we've gone through all the blood gas documents in this case, it's almost always the designated nurse that makes the entry in the chart, isn't it? No, I don't agree with that. You don't agree? No. Well, I'm not going to go through them all now, you'll be glad to know. Now, when you were being asked questions about this a while ago, you said that Nurse A had remained with child B at this stage. Do you remember that? Yes, she was in the nursery with her, yes. No, you said she actually was with her. Do you remember saying that? No. You don't remember that? No. Was that a police interview? No. That's when Mr. Myers was asking you questions. I know Nurse A was with her. She realigned the prongs, and then we put the TPM bag up, so yes, she was with her, and she carried out the blood gas. Do you remember Nurse A telling the jury that in fact she was diverted by preparing medication for another child in Nursery 1? Yes, we were both preparing that medication. And that's why you were doing the observations on child B, isn't it? Because she was actually doing, I can't say that. I was checking medication with nurse A. She was the sterile nurse? Yes. She was doing the medication and you were doing the other jobs? No, I'd have to be by her side watching everything that she was doing. That is the role of the second checker. So how did you do the blood gas at 0016? I have not. I run that through the machine for nurse A. But you've got to be with her while she's preparing the medication for the other child. How can you go to the blood gas room and be with her? What time is the medication for the other child? She told us when she gave evidence. That is what she was doing at this time. She also said she was the other side of that little wall in the nursery. Yes, we were both there preparing medication, yes. So you do remember? I remember us both being in the nursery, yes. No, you remember being the other side of that little wall from child B, do you? No, I remember us preparing medication. That is where the medication is prescribed and drawn up. Do you remember telling the jury that it was nurse A that had alerted you to child B's collapse? Yes, I'm unsure which way round it was. Which way round what was? Well, I'm unsure whether I spotted it first or whether nurse A alerted me. Right. That's why you told the jury that she alerted you, because you weren't sure which way round it was. My memory is she alerted me, but I can't say for definite now. That was my memory at the time. So she's wrong about that? Potentially, yes. Well, everything's potentially, but are you saying she's wrong? I can't sit here now and definitively say which way, no. You injected child B with air, didn't you? No, I didn't. Do you remember on Friday the 5th of May, you were asked questions by your counsel about what happened to child B at this point? Yes. I'll remind you of what you said and ask you whether you want to change any of it. The question you were asked was, do you recall how child B was? When you say her colour had changed, could you describe that? You replied, she had become quite mottled and dark. Yes. Is that accurate? Yes. You were then asked, all over her body or on particular parts of her body? You replied, all over, from memory. Yes. You were then asked, can you describe that colour again? You replied, it was a dark, mottling colour. Yes. And you saw that? You were asked, and you said, yes. Yes. You were then asked a question, had you seen anything like that colouring before? Yes. Do you remember what your answer was? No. What do you mean? You were asked the question again. Had you seen that type of colouring on any baby before this point? And your answer? Do you remember? No. Yes, it was like general mottling that we do see on babies. Yes, and I agree with that. I know you do. You were then asked a question, right, was it unusual or was it not unusual in your opinion? You replied, it was not unusual, but obviously we were concerned for child B because of child A's decline the night before. Yes. And so the essence, I'm going to suggest to you, that the essence of what you were saying to the court on Friday the 5th of May was that child B had what I will describe as common or garden mottling. I would say her mottling was more pronounced maybe than general, but yes, it was mottling. Have you always said that? I don't recall. You don't recall? Why would you say anything different? That's how I remember it now, yes. Okay. If we go to your interview, please. So back to file number 1. It's the first of the child B interviews, pages 7 to 8. You were asked the question, okay, and that mottling as you've described it, is it something you witnessed in child B yourself? You replied, yes. You were asked the question, you did? When was that? You replied, I don't recall at what point. You were asked the question, right, and the circumstances around you seeing the mottling. Who was with you at the time? You replied, I think it was nurse A. You asked the question, can you describe that mottling? Is it similar to that with child A? Different? You replied, I think she was more mottled as opposed to child A was paler. Child A was more pale centrally, mottled peripherally, And I think from what I recall, child B was more mottled, and that extended over more of her body rather than just her limbs. You were then asked the question, so was it a different colour? You replied, from what I remember, it was darker, just darker than child A. So child A was pale, whereas child B was more mottled, which is a sort of purpley red. Yes. Is that true? Yes. Right, okay. Rash appearance is the phrase you then use. Rash appearance. This isn't mottling. This isn't common or garden mottling you're describing, is it? Yes, it's more pronounced mottling. It's darker mottling, but it is mottling. Why did you use the word rash appearance? I can't recall now. What does it mean to you now? These are your words. What do they mean? I don't know. I would take rash appearance to mean that it was all over the body. The next question was, any particular shapes to that? And your answer, please? I replied, well, usually mottling is sort of a patchy round appearance. Yes. Are you saying this was normal? No, mottling is not normal, but it is something that we see. Okay. And in the normal parameters of mottling, are you saying this was normal? No, it was more pronounced than just general mottling. If it was, do you think it was remarkable? I can't recall specifically. I know once we saw it, it came very quickly, and in view of child A's deterioration, everybody acted very quickly. You say, quote, once we saw it, it came very quickly. Were you with child B before it appeared? No. Why did you say, once we saw it, it came very quickly? That's just... I've rephrased that wrong, sorry. That's all right. Well, it's all right. You just say what you mean. If this was all fairly normal, why did the doctor ask you to go and get a camera? In view of what had happened with child A the day before, we did not want to take any chances and wanted to document everything that was happening. Let's look at what other people said about this and see whether you agree or disagree with them, okay? I'm going to start on this occasion with the mother of child A and child B. What she said is this. It was a very similar situation to child A. Child B's heart and oxygen saturation levels had fallen rapidly. The female consultant went on to describe seeing blotches mottling across her skin, hand and feet. She asked our permission to take pictures of the mottling, and she, that is the consultant, stated she had never seen this before. This is Dr. B, one of the gang of four. I remember being really surprised this was something she had never witnessed before. I imagined the consultant of neonatal care would have seen everything. By the time the staff had organised the camera, it had disappeared. Do you accept what the mother of child A and B says? I accept there was mottling, yes. Do you accept that Dr. B was saying at the time, I have never seen anything like this before? I can't recall that conversation, no. But you have agreed the evidence. Sorry? I don't understand. The mother of child A and B didn't give evidence because what she says in her witness statement is agreed. Yes. So it is agreed that Dr. B said, I have never witnessed this before. Yes, but it was not said to me. No, you agree it was said. Yes. And do you remember it being said? No. Why are you prepared to agree this then, when you're not prepared to agree other witnesses based on what they saw? Here we have something that you say you did not hear, that you are prepared to accept. Is there a reason for that? I'm relying on that person being accurate. I wasn't there for that conversation, so I can't say whether that was said or not. Did you go and get the camera? Yes. Were you keen to get a picture of what it was that was so unusual? No, I was asked to go and get the camera, which I did immediately. That was what the doctors requested, and by the time I came back, her skin was normalised. Do you accept that this was mottling that is not normal mottling? It was more pronounced mottling, yes, and in view of what had happened with child A, all of the staff were very keen to act quickly on any change with her, in case it was anything that was related to child A. Do you remember Dr. Lambie? Yes. She made a note that's at tile 243, if anybody wants to keep a note, but I'll remind you of what she actually said in evidence. I do remember she was being resuscitated when I arrived. She was a very dusky, pale grey colour. Is that accurate? I can't say at that point. I don't know if I was there at that point. As we were helping her, she was then developing widespread blotches. Do you accept that is accurate? Not from my memory, no. It was mottling. This wasn't disputed in cross-examination. You understand that. This wasn't challenged. Yes, but I wasn't there at that point. Potentially I was getting the camera. Well, do you accept it? If that's what she says she saw, then yes. Okay. I accidentally didn't read the full sentence there, so I'll read the full sentence. As we were helping her, she was then developing widespread blotches, is probably the best way of describing it, patches of a purpley red colour. Do you accept that? I don't recall ever seeing that, but I accept if that's what she thinks she saw, then yes. They would flush up, last about a few seconds, 10 seconds, and then disappear and then appear elsewhere. Do you accept that? No, I did not see anything like that, and no conversation was ever had about that. Therefore, do you say that that is untrue? I can't comment for them, but it's not something that I saw or was aware of, no. Do you remember, when being asked questions on your behalf, Dr. Letby said that she had never seen anything like this before? Yes. Your friend, Nurse A, she said that what she saw was the same as Child A. I don't agree with that. What Nurse A said is this. She suddenly looked very ill. She looked very like her brother had done the night before, with the pale white, with this purple blotchy discoloration, and she indicated over her chest. I just remember thinking, no, not again. I've never seen anything like that before, and then to see his sister with the same appearance. Remember that? Yes. That's the truth, isn't it, Lucy Letby? No, I do not agree with that. That's not what I saw. Finally, we had Dr. B saying, I've seen that there's a purple blotchiness to the right side, mid-abdomen. It's a bit like what you're describing with Child A, isn't it? One side of discoloration? It was paleness. But on one side? Yes. She said, and right hand and the baby is pink and active, end quote. Remember Nurse A? Of course, she was considerably senior to you, wasn't she? Yes. You've been looking after the sickest babies for 2 months. I don't understand, sorry. You've been QAS trained for a couple of months? 2 months? Yes. 3 months maybe? I don't know. Yes. She had a couple of decades of experience looking after the sickest babies. Yes. And yet, all of a sudden, once Child B had had this episode, in effect you elbowed out Nurse A and took over the care of Child B, didn't you? No, I did not take over the care of Child B. We've already seen the observations at 1 o'clock. You carried those out, didn't you? Yes, Nurse A was supporting the parents at that point. It's not unusual for nursing staff to assist each other with obs or fluids or medications. That's not her handing the care over to me. Let's look at tile 226, please, in the bottom left at 0100 hours. That's your writing, isn't it? And your initials at the bottom? Yes. Intubated, it says at 23:36. I think that's a mistake, isn't it, on the times? Yes. It was actually 01 or 0036. Yes. Tile 232, please. A blood gas record at 0051. Your writing again? Yes. As it had been at 0016? Yes. Tile 238, please. 0100? Is that you making the entries at 0100? Yes. Tile 241, 0110, you and Mary Griffiths signing for morphine for Child B. Yes. Tile 250 to 251, you and Nurse A co-signing for medications at 0207. Yes. Tile 253 to 256, more medications at 0225? Yes. Were you suggesting to any of your colleagues that perhaps antiphospholipid syndrome was an explanation for the death of Child A and the collapse of Child B? No, because I wasn't aware that. I didn't have any details about what antiphospholipid syndrome was. I'd never heard of it before. Let's just go back to the Child A sequence if we can, please, Mr. Murphy. Sorry to jump around. Can we just have a look at tile 337, please? Querying a clotting problem. That's what antiphospholipid syndrome is, isn't it? Yes, I know that now, yes. You knew that then, because you were sending the text. No, that was a discussion. They were querying a clotting problem. I don't think the word antiphospholipid syndrome was used at that point. Can we go back to the police interview, please? A reference I missed out earlier. Almost exactly halfway down the page, what did you say in answer to the question, or any observations that you had with child B that caused you concern at all on that shift? I replied, I do remember that she had some mottling that looked a little bit similar to child A's appearance the day before. You told the jury that all you saw on child A was whiteness. Yes. How did her mottling look similar to child A? I've then gone on to describe it in more detail. Yes, but it's not the description that I'm interested in. I'm interested in why you were linking or drawing a similarity between what you had seen on child A and what you had seen on child B. I can't say now, I don't know. Well, I'll offer you a reason. Because they were the same. No, I don't agree with that. Like your friend Nurse A said, oh no, not again. She was referring to a sick baby. She didn't want something happening again. She wasn't referring to the rash. No. She was referring to the rash, Lucy Letby. Okay. That's precisely what she was referring to. Okay, I don't agree with that. I know you don't agree, but you're also not going to be able to rewrite what she said, are you? No. Do you accept that all the people who saw the skin discoloration say that they hadn't seen this sort of thing before? I have to accept what they say, yes. Do you accept that Professor Kinsey has excluded a blood disorder as a cause for what was seen? Yes. Do you accept that Dr. Arthurs saw the bubbles in child A's case? Yes. And that Dr. Marnarides found them in histology, also in child A's case? Yes. Do you accept that air was put into the IV lines of both children? No. Or either of them? No. Do you accept that you had the opportunity to have access to the IV lines of both children just before they collapsed? Yes, but I didn't access the lines.